Hey everyone, please log into Clever. All right, so for your warm up, I want you to describe the last thing you watched on Netflix or some other streaming service without actually naming it. It's not as easy as you think. All right, welcome to week 5, lesson 8. We are talking about common contaminants found in our water and thinking about where do they come from and how do they get there. So, some reminders as usual, please check your assignments for grades as well as comments or returns. Realize that if I return something to you and say, hey, you did this wrong, or I return it and it doesn't have a grade, you're allowed to redo it and turn it back in for an improved grade. Always check the ed puzzles because there's been several people in the last couple days that their grades have not been uploading to Google Classroom, which means that you didn't finish it all the way through the very end. So pay attention to that. Remember our expectations, and whenever you come to live class, remember there are some just basic expectations to meet there. So this week, what we're talking about is human impact on water and how these impacts are causing water contamination. We're going to look at some specific examples, and we're going to hopefully come to an understanding of what are some of the things that end up in our water and why are they there? How do they get there? From what do they come? So there are several assignments this week. You heard about this in the week preview. After today's lesson, there's 2 assignments that will be posted, and one of which we're actually going to spend a couple minutes going over at the end of class. It's always important to watch these lessons to get yourself ready for the assignments. So if you're ever struggling with an assignment, you can go back and watch the lesson. If you haven't, you need to do that. Or you can always watch it over again and get another review or follow-up. I want to remind you that you can do your makeup work whenever works for you. Realize that there are no real due dates. Turn in work whenever you can and work at a pace that works for you. So thank you guys for being here. Let's get into this. So we're talking about sources of water contamination. So when I say water contamination, I mean anything that's in water that isn't water. So anything that is added or that is in there that is not just pure H2O. The reality is that any water that you're drinking, most likely, or that you're using, does have something dissolved in it, and some of those things are not bad for you, but there are some things that end up in our water that are not great for us. An easy way to tell if your water is safe is this comparison right here, which we will talk more about in a later lesson, but what is called turbidity. So if your water is clear, if it you can see through it, you don't see any solids dissolved in it, and it smells all right, it's probably pretty good. If it's chunky, if it's got a color, you can't see through it, that's not a good sign. So we're kind of just brainstorming and trying to come up with some ideas about where water contamination comes from. What are some common contaminants that then occur? So let's start with this. What are some sources of possible water contamination? Just brainstorm some ideas of where could water or what places could cause water contamination. All right, so there are five categories: agricultural, commercial, industrial, residential, and then anything that doesn't fit into those 4 big categories is called other. So all of these sources can kind of fit into these different areas. So let's check and make sure that we kind of understand what the difference between agricultural, commercial, industrial, and residential are. So take a look at images 1, 2, 3, and 4 and decide which of these sources is described in each picture. Good work. So agricultural was image number 4. That is anything related to farming. So farming can be like raising or growing plants. It also can have to do with like cattle or animal products and anything that's happening on a farm. Commercial is any sort of business where there's some sort of transaction with money paying for either some food, a good, or a service. Industrial is relating to stuff that's made in factories, so where things are produced. And then residential is where we live, so either a house or apartment or a condo, something like that. Again, any of these other sources or spaces for possible contamination, those are that don't fit into those are in these other. All right. So it's important for us to remember these major sources. And so if we think about or name like any sort of place, it should be able to fit into one of these categories. So, for example, if we're talking about a dairy farm, that would be agricultural. That's a place where they have cows that they're collecting milk from, right? If we're talking about a shoe store, that is a commercial place, right? If we're talking about a rubber factory, that is an industry. If we're talking about your granny's house down the street, that is a residential place, okay? And all of those places actually probably are contributing to water pollution and water contamination. So, thinking about things that could be in any of those spaces. So, things that could be at your house, things that could be in a factory, things that could be at a business of any sort, things that could be out on a farm that result in getting into your water. What are some specific types of water contaminants that could end up in your water? So a great example for us to start thinking about is like at your house, anytime you go to, let's say, clean off the counter, you're using some sort of chemical, right? And some washcloth, and you go and you wring out the washcloth. That's getting whatever that spray container or chemical is into your water. You then put that washcloth into the washer and you use laundry detergent. Okay, that's adding a chemical to your water. So some other contaminants could be specifically on farms. There's different pesticides, so chemicals that are used to kill insects, and different fertilizers. Those are chemicals that are used to help plants grow. Those can find their way into our water. In industry, there's all kinds of stuff because anywhere that anything's being produced, they're probably using some sort of chemicals. And that can end up in water. We have fuels from like gas tanks or from different industry places, toxic waste in landfills. So anything that you throw in the trash, eventually those things might break down, and that can end up in our water. In your house, toilet cleaner, drain cleaner, any household cleaner, any disinfectants. We've been using lots of Lysol and stuff, right? When you're building houses, there's all kinds of different grease and tar and rust proofing things. There's all kinds of stuff that's being used. And that doesn't even get into like businesses. Like, so if you're at an auto shop, there might be antifreeze that can make it into water, transmission fluid, battery acid. Right now, we are seeing a lot of salt being used to clear off roads and sidewalks, and that can end up in your water as well. So if we think about Louisville as a urban place, where are some places in Louisville that might have water contamination? So, I mean, right off the bat, we should think about the Ohio River. There are several factories that are based on the Ohio River, and stuff is being dumped in there all the time. We also see plenty of trash. We see sewage that might be sent into the Ohio River. And anytime that it rains, all of the stuff that gets washed away from the streets and from people's cars into the river. All right. So, an assignment that you guys are going to be working on to kind of hopefully get a better understanding of how humans play a role in the water cycle and how we're kind of messing things up is by analyzing a text. So, what you're going to do is you're going to go to Google Classroom. You're going to go to, oops, you're going to go week 5 assignments, and then number 18. This is the one that I want to talk through. And it will take you to this assignment right here. So to get us back to the beginning, it will look like this. The effects of urbanization on the water cycle. So here's the process that you're going to follow. What I've done is I've taken about a 2-page essay or article, and I've put it into chunks. And on each chunk has its own slide. On each slide, you're going to read the chunk text, and you're going to use 3 color sticky notes. So the sticky notes are over here. You should be able to make sticky notes. You're going to use yellow, green, and blue. You're going to first going to read the chunk and decide what the main idea or main ideas are. You're going to use the yellow sticky note to write whatever the main idea. So main idea will be out with your yellow sticky note. The green sticky note I'll make that tiny over here just so we can see what it looks like. The green is going to be, you're going to write down something from the text that applies back or ties back to your life. All right, so green sticky note. Okay. All right. And then the third color sticky note that you're going to use is blue. And what you're going to do with the blue one is simply come up with some sort of question that you can think of related to that text chunk. All right. So on each slide, or each slide, you should have at least 3 sticky notes, one of each color one for each purpose. So, for example, the chunked text here says, as our communities grow, we notice many visible changes, including housing developments, road networks, and expansion of services, and more. These changes impact our precious water resources, with pollution of water resources being one potential impact. To understand our water supplies, how our water supplies can be polluted, it's important to understand the oldest solar powered recycling system, the water cycle, also called the hydrologic cycle. All right. So when I read that, what I'm seeing and what I'm thinking as the main ideas is that there is something called the hydrologic cycle or the water cycle, and it is a solar powered recycling system. So it's some sort of cycle that is based on the water and the sun. And then the other thing is that this top part of this text here is kind of talking about how we as humans are building communities, so building neighborhoods, building cities, and we're creating housing, we're adding roads, we're building it. So expansion of services, I think of like all the different businesses in your neighborhood, etc. Those are all impacting our water cycle. So over here, you'll see that my 2 yellow sticky notes say the oldest solar powered recycling system is called the hydrologic cycle, and pollution is a potential impact of human changes to communities. Great. So that's the main idea of this chunk. With the green sticky note, again, where I'm connecting it to my life, I personally live in a house, I drive on roads, and I use other services in my neighborhood. So if that's all impacting and causing pollution, that means that I'm probably part of this pollution. The last thing is with the blue sticky note, we're going to write some sort of question. My question is why is the water cycle called the hydrologic cycle? There's got to be some reason for that. All right. So I've done one chunk for you. You're going to go through and do the rest of these chunks. You notice that they're not super long. There's like 1 or 2 that's kind of long, but they're not very long. And where you're going to end back up is with these 2 images here that you have already spent some time analyzing. Now, after this lesson and after finishing or looking at that chunked text to find and learn some main ideas about the water cycle in general, and then after humans have impacted it with urbanization, you're going to answer this question: how does urbanization affect the water cycle? And you will type your answer right down there. Okay. Comparing and understanding what we know. All right. So the other assignment is purely going to be a Edpuzzle talking about water pollution. So with that, your exit slip questions are kind of twofold. First of all, what's something interesting that you learned today? And then second is, what does how does water contamination relate to your life? Or how does what we talked about or learned about today relate to you? And I don't know is not an answer. All right. So that's it. If you have any questions, please don't be afraid or hesitate to leave a question here or put one on on a private message on an assignment. Other than that, I will see you all later. Have a great day. Bye.